Thanks for joining us this morning. This morning, we're going to run through our P6-Auditor tool. We will record the session and we'll send it through once the session is completed. I'm Nicole Jardin. I'm joining you actually from Montreal today. I'm normally in Calgary. I'm the founder and CEO of Emerald Associates. And with me today is Sue Hopkins, joining us from Wyoming. She's going to do the actual live walkthrough of P6-Auditor. So let me touch on why we built P6-Auditor. So some of the common struggles that you face when you've got a P6 environment, particularly with a lot of users across perhaps multiple plants, multiple geographical areas, is that we share some common data. So we've got global data inside P6, and you need to allow different groups to be able to update those. So that can be a challenge in making sure that global data stays the way it should be, that you don't have an accidental delete, that sort of thing, and making sure that you know if something does go wrong, who did it, how to rectify the situation. So that can be a challenge. So events are things like deletes, adding things, updating things. So monitoring and managing events and understanding who's performing those events and when. It's not that easy to find that out. If you see that a project's deleted, you can't find it. The question is, okay, well, who did that? And unfortunately, at times, we have people who won't fess up that maybe they did that accidentally, or maybe they don't even know they did it, right? Sometimes you might be working at a level in P6, let's say the EPS, and if you delete the EPS, you might delete projects. So it's not always that they're hiding that they did it. They may not even realize they've done it. So being able to understand those types of things are like maybe updating activity codes. Let's say you do a fill down and you update a bunch of activity codes you didn't mean to, that sort of thing. It's not always easy to know because the last edit information is not necessarily going to show you something that happened 10 minutes before, okay? So these things are not easy, and we've built P6-Auditor to help address some of those typical concerns. The other thing is just managing your licenses, understanding, especially if you have a large pool of users, understanding who is physically accessing P6, who's using it, how often. It's not easy to understand that data. So what we did was we built P6-Auditor to access the events information. So there's events that can be turned on in P6. It's done in the web that create these this database, essentially these extra data tables that you can access. And if you're good at querying a bunch of tables, you can go ahead and do that. Or you can just get P6-Auditor, which makes it much, much easier. You don't need to be a database expert, marrying up a bunch of tables, digging through with all sorts of queries. We've tried to make P6-Auditor easy for the lay P6 user to be able to go in and try and find the things that they're looking for. Okay, so who made edits? When did they do them? Who did deletes? When did they do them? That sort of thing. Okay, so P6-Auditor, when you're deploying it, you can deploy it within your organization on premise. It needs to be with your P6. So it can also be in a cloud, but it needs to be in the same hosted environment as your P6 because it is a database level type of tool. Most of our tools can be deployed also in a hybrid cloud on-premise type of situation. But P6-Auditor is the one exception. It can't be in that manner. So let me touch on the three aspects that we've built out in Auditor in this current version. In this version, we've really done a lot of work to improve the user interface to make it easier to audit things and save your layout, essentially, of what you want to audit. So it's just much easier to use than our previous version. So we look at events. So those are the things I was mentioning, the edits, the adding, the updating, the deleting. So we look at a bunch of those types of events, and Sue's going to run through some common examples that we've done with our clients, or that our clients have given us feedback that they use the Auditor for. We look at the user activity, so the logins, the licensing, just to make administering that aspect of P6 easier for the admin people or person. And then usage reports. So usage reports has a bit of overlap with our P6 loader tool, but this is meant to allow people to go see where things are used. So things like activity codes, things like user-defined fields. Go see where they're used, which projects they're used in, so you can understand whether or not you can clean them up. And cleaning them up, especially if you're doing a lot of cleanup, that's what P6 Loader is really great for. Okay, so not only seeing where they're used, but fixing, cleaning them up. So swapping things out or possibly removing things that aren't used and that sort of thing. So they're kind of complementary to one another. And then when you're putting together those reports or a layout, you can think of it as a layout. You can create your definition, and Sue will show you how to do that. You can save it, and then that means you can reuse it when you need it on the next run. Now, in terms of the usage reports or events, let me touch on the types of events that we're able to look at. So we look at global events, and Sue will run through some of those. Things like project codes, projects, EPS, that sort of thing. Very common types of global data that you want to look at and make sure you know who's touching them, who's making changes. Codes, PDFs, because they're shared, they're considered global data. And of course, beyond global data, we're looking at project activities. Okay, so what's happening on activities? So let's say someone deletes a whole WBS and they roll out some activities. The benefit of that is you can see who did it, so you can coach them up, because they may not have realized, although there are messages warning them, they may not have realized what they did. Sometimes people jump through those messages too quickly. And then also, if you do need to get your IT to give you a backup, this helps you identify when. Okay, so that's where there's some value in that. On the usage report sides, again, Sue will show you a bit more detail, but we are looking at, again, generally global data. So calendars, resource roles, codes, EDFs, so that you can manage those lists, because they can get quite large and quite unwieldy, especially if you're doing a lot of importing and possibly growing your database. Okay, now if that's one of your struggles, you should definitely look at coming to our P6 Scrubber webinar, because that tool really is awesome to help keep your database clean. And then on the user front, I mentioned the logins, active sessions, so how often they're logging in, essentially that's what that kind of tells you, and what licensing you've given out. Okay, so that way you can run reports, make sure that you're in compliance and that you're not using more licenses than you've acquired. And if you are, you can consider whether or not you need to acquire a few more licenses to cover the growing usage. Okay, so I think I've given you a bit of a flavor, and probably makes sense to hand it over to Sue and let her do a deep dive and show us exactly how this tool works. So I'm going to pass it over to Sue. And
Okay.
you got it?
Yep, I have it. I'm
Okay,
going
perfect.
to share my screen here. Thank you, Nicole. So what you're seeing here is the login screen for P6-Auditor. In a case where if you had, several different databases that you wanted to actually run Auditor on, this is much like Primavera. You would have this little drop-down area here that would give you your databases that you are going to be accessing. So you choose the correct database and sign in. Now, when we go into Auditor, you can see that we have those three categories that Nicole spoke about. We have our event reporting, we have our usage report, we have user activity. So first of all, let's take a look at our event reporting. So when I go into event reporting, I can see that I've got quite a few tables that are actually turned on for auditing in P6. And those tables are actually displayed across the top here so that if you're looking for a specific type of information, you know where to go and look for that. So I'm going to run through just a few case studies, I guess, for actually real life events that we've had our clients needing to get information for. So first of all, I'm just going to go over to P6 really quickly and just kind of talk a little bit. And let me go back to my projects here. The first thing I'm going to look at is moving an EPS node. So previously, my EPS node, called this Auditor EPS, was up in my Auditor EPS node, and it got moved down to this other node. So I'm kind of curious as to who did that, and maybe if it was by mistake or whether it was actually something that needed to occur. I can investigate that. So I'm going to go back to Auditor, and I'm going to take a look at where I am right now, right here in this EPS audit. So you can see that we've got these tables that are displayed here. And there's a myriad of information as you scroll over to the side. So there's a lot of different things that you can take a look at in these tables. In our case, we want to look for that Auditor EPS. So I'm going to filter for that Auditor EPS ID. So I'm going to go and I'm just going to do a contains. And I'm going to just put Auditor EPS. And I'm going to filter for that. So that makes it so I can easily see what happened with this EPS node. I can see where it was created and that it was put in this Auditor EPS, which is where I expected to see it. However, it looks like a little bit later that it was then moved from that Auditor EPS to the P6 load demo EPS. And I can tell that because of this little arrow here. That little arrow in these fields shows you what was the previous value and what the current value is after it was changed. So now I can see, who the user was, kind of the schedule of events that happened. And if needed, I can go talk to this user, who happens to be me, but I can go talk to this user and find out exactly what the scenario was for moving that and see if maybe it needs to be moved back or maybe we need to have a discussion about it. So that's one case study. Now, another case study is when, say, for instance, you have a project that you've been working on and it goes missing. It's been deleted. You can't find it anywhere in your database. Well, what's really easy is that I can actually go into this project audit here and I can find out where that information went, what happened to it. So first of all, I can go into my operation here and I can filter by the operation. So I'm just looking for deletes in this case, because I want to find out what happened. Now, as I told you, there are other fields over on the side here, and I want to find out where my project short name, what happened to it. So what I can do, because this is at the end of my column or my table, I can actually grab that and I can move it up towards the front where I can see it better. And I can analyze it next to the date and the user and what actually happened here. So I'm just going to go on. I'm going to drop it right after my operation column. So now I can take a look and I can see, okay, this was my project right here, this P6L BP2-2, and now it's blank. I can see that it was deleted on August 18th at 12:39 p.m. And then I can see who the user was. So it's very quick for me to find out what happened to that project, when it was deleted. And if I need to have it restored, I can go back to my IT group and ask them to please restore that project and tell them a time that it was deleted so that they know where to go back to look for that project on the backups. So another good case scenario. Now, my final case scenario is a little bit more complicated, but this was a real life case for one of our clients. What happened is that they had a project that had an activity code that was assigned to that project. It was a global activity code. And in this example, I had this work order activity code that was populated the last time I was working with this project, and now it's missing. And I'm not sure what happened there. It's obviously there because I still have that column displayed, so it's got to be there. So I can go into my enterprise data and my activity codes, and I can take a look at, here's this work order here, and yes, those look like the values that should have been in this work order activity code. So obviously it's there, but why isn't it assigned to my project anymore? So I'm going to go and investigate that. So going to P6-Auditor, I'm going to go and I'm going to look at my activity code type audit. And with that, luckily, I have it, it's right here at the top. But if it weren't, I could again filter on this activity code type and take a look at just that work order, that P6L work order. Now, another thing I could do is look for the delete and the insert. Just, there's several ways that I can go about this, but in my case, I would want to look for the work order. So I can see that indeed the work order was deleted at some point, exactly at 1:42 yesterday. So this is telling me what time that was deleted, which explains why it's no longer in my project. Now, it looks like this user realized what they did and then came back in and repopulated that and put those values in that work order activity code back in to the database. However, the problem with that is that it does not know, or P6 doesn't know where that was assigned prior to its deletion. So it doesn't reassign those out there. So maybe there's some coaching that needs to be done with my user into how to properly handle if something gets deleted accidentally. Instead of, adding it back in, maybe they weren't aware that it doesn't populate back into the projects where it was previously assigned. So it gives me an opportunity to coach my user and talk to them about what happens and what the proper procedure is when they delete something. As well as maybe I need to go back to my IT again and have them restore those activity codes for me, because there were a lot of them. And to have to redo them all would not be fun. So this gives me a date and time that I can go back to my IT group and let them know when to pull that project for those activity codes.
I think this is where deploying on Oracle has some advantages than some of the other database tools, back-end tools, because I think there's rollback capability. So that's something that we do in all our hosted environments. We've got the rollback turned on.
Yep.
Makes it easier to go back.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the next item I want to take a look at is our usage reports. So we've got different types of usage reports that we can run and that we can take a look at. So we've got our activity code types, our activity codes, which are the values for the activity codes that are used. We have calendars, resources, roles, as well as UDFs. So I want to take a look at my calendar usage. I'm cleaning up my database, and I want to see in my database where calendars are used, or if they're used at all, so that then I can turn around and use our P6-Loader tool to clean those up and get my database tidy and working nicely. So with the usage reports, I can choose one or many different projects depending on how I want to analyze my data. Well, in my case, I want to look at all the projects. So I'm just going to click on this enterprise, and that's going to check mark all of my projects in my database. Then I'm just going to go one by my calendars to find out which ones are in use and which ones are not. So if I click on my standard 5-day, I can see that I've got this calendar being used, and I've got several projects that are using it. And so I probably don't want to delete this calendar because it's being used. So it's going to list for me the projects or the baselines that are included with this, that use this calendar. Now my next one, I'm going to go in and take a look at that. Well, I can see here on this one that this is not used at all. So I may want to analyze this and delete it, or perhaps find out if this is something, if this is a calendar that is used, and if I need to keep it. But it's going to tell me there's nothing using this calendar right now. Now the same happens with all these calendars as I go down. So this is just an easy way to go and take a look at where your data is being used and help you to determine what needs to be cleaned up in your database. Now, the last piece that I want to visit is the user activity. So we have several options on our user activity. We have active sessions, so it looks like it's just me in there right now, as well as license usage. So if you have many different users, and some of them are licensed, they're using P6 or are licensed to use P6, but maybe you have a few that are not, that don't have a license allocated to them. Now, theoretically, this is going to be a larger list. This is a smaller user database here, or so, kind of think of this in the context of having many users. So what I can do here is I can actually filter by whether they have a license or not, because I want to find out if I'm in compliance with my license count. So I'm going to filter this, and I'm just going to set it equal to yes. And now I have a quick, easy list on what users are licensed in my database, and I can analyze whether I am being whether I have enough licenses or whether maybe I need to purchase some more. Now, this might be something that I run on a regular basis. Maybe my manager wants to see this, monthly, or, every 2 months or whatever. What I can do is I can actually save this layout. So I can save this as a filter here. And if I wanted to sort this in any way, let's say I wanted to sort it, alphabetically by login or whatever, I can certainly do that also. Then I can save that layout. So over here in the bottom right-hand corner, I can click this layout button and it gives me the option to save as. Well, I also have the ability to save multiple layouts. So I can save multiple layouts, and every time when I go out to do an analysis that I run regularly, I can simply just load this layout up, and I don't have to redo all of my layout in my report. So I'm just going to save this as, and I'm just going to call this the user licenses. Oops. Not used, user licenses active. And I'm going to apply that. So the next time I go in, I can apply this, come to this activity report, I can apply it, and it's automatically just going to do it for me. I don't have to build my filter or do anything like that. Now, another thing I can do, I said my manager wanted to see this report. So I can actually export this out to Excel. So when I export it, it's going to come out and it's going to open up in Excel. If I needed to, do any kind of notes or anything on this, I can actually save this and then share it with my manager, maybe an email or what have you. So it's very easy to take these reports out to Excel so that that data can be shared. Now, the last thing I might want to be analyzing is that, yes, I see these people have licenses, but are they actually using P6? Are they using this P6 license? So I can actually go into user login history, and it's going to give me the logins for the last 30 days. Now, I might want to sort this. So I want to do it descending, and I just click in that top column header, and so I can see exactly who is logged in the last month and how often. Now I might want to go back to that user license usage and see, do these other users who haven't been in the last 30 days actually need to be consuming that license for Primavera? So maybe I want to take some out, or maybe they just aren't busy in Primavera right now, and they actually do still need that license. So before I go hand it back to Nicole, just going to check in. Are there any questions that anyone wants to ask? You can go ahead and put them in the chat if you'd like. And I'll just wait a moment for that. Okay, so doesn't look like there's any questions there. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it back over to Nicole so that she can wrap things up for us.
Okay, thanks, Sue. So hopefully you got the idea of how easy tool really is to use. If you've ever had to try and figure out how something got moved, got deleted, it can be virtually impossible if you don't have any tools to assist you with that. I know one of the common ones I get is UPS moves, and I'm not totally sure the user's doing it. I feel like there could be something wrong in the software, but at least you can track down what's going on with that. So it's quite an easy tool to use, and the new features that we've added to this version with the ability to save the layouts, maneuver the columns, and the filtering is very, very simple. Really makes it even easier than our previous versions. Now, the way that we sell this software, it's per database. So it's not per user, so more than one person can log in and do this kind of work. So it's to the database. And if you've got one database, the standard package is probably a good one. If you've got more, we've got a professional and a corporate package as well. So you can reach out on that, and it's pretty economical. You're looking at, in the range of $100 or less $100 per month type of thing to be able to get in and audit this. So that can easily bring a big return on investment. If you spend even an hour trying to figure out what the heck has happened, you probably paid for the tool. So it's worth exploring. Now, in terms of the benefits and the ROI that our clients are seeing is very much a time-saving thing. So when an admin can react quickly, or a super user can react quickly when someone says, oops, I deleted something or I renamed something, and they can go in and trace it down and react very quickly. That is a huge time-saving capability that's there. Now, I know myself, and this is not about, maybe a new user of P6. I know myself the other day, I was in a client's database and I was trying to do something, and I overwrote the project ID. And I hit enter before I realized, because you can escape, and I hit enter before I realized, and I went immediately to Auditor to go find what the ID was, because I'm not that familiar with all the projects. I didn't know what it was called. And so I immediately went to Auditor, got the right ID, and put it back in. Okay, so this is the kind of thing that can save you a lot of time. And it also makes it a little bit more transparent. When people realize that there's a way to fix some of their mistakes, they might be a bit more open to owning up to them and own up to them a little quicker. So that also is important. Now, in terms of how easy it is to use, I hope that came across in the examples Sue showed you. And those are real examples we do either with our clients, because we host for many of our clients, and or we've helped them use the Auditor to do some of these feature functions. So when you're managing a lot of big groups and deal with EPS nodes moving, this is a very common one. I've seen it even in our database, because we use P6 for our timesheets. Even in our database, I've seen the EPS move, and I'm not 100% sure it is a person doing it, but in any case, the Auditor helps us know where that's coming from. And this is an important coaching moment. It also might help expose or highlight a gap in the way that you've set up the security. Okay, so you might not have realized that you've given people maybe too many nodes that they're accessing, and you could revisit the security, maybe adding a few more OBS layers, possibly, and secure those nodes so that they're not able to move a higher level of the EPS structure accidentally. Okay, so this is something that I've definitely taken advantage of with more than one of my clients. Now, in terms of costs, so searching for problems as an administrator, trying to figure out who did something, how to coach them, can be very frustrating. When you're pretty sure somebody probably made the change, but they won't admit to it. Now, this helps you find a little bit more of the truth, because you can see who did it, you can see when. Okay, so then you can bring it up to the user and try and coach them. And it usually helps jog their memory. Okay, because they're not owning up to it doesn't mean they're trying to hide that they did it. They may not even realize they did it. So this helps kind of figure out, okay, well, I was doing this at the time, and okay, yeah, I see, I probably, made a mistake and did a fill down. So there's a lot of value in that, and it really reduces the frustration. And I've seen in some cases, since the users know the auditor's there, they'll tell you right away when they realize they've made a mistake. They're less likely to hide it and hope no one notices. They'll just own up to it. So it really goes a long way to making the team work better. And that's really what we're looking for. And then, okay, that's not relevant. So in terms of examples, I have a client that I work with, EverSource Energy in the US. They're a large user of P6. They've got many business units using P6. So the P6 auditor is available to each one of their super users to trace those types of things that Sue was mentioning. Okay, they use it to trace deleting activity codes. They have certain activity codes that are on reports, so they definitely use it to trace deleting activity codes and or overwriting activity codes. Because again, a fill down is easy to make a mistake and maybe overwrite a code that we shouldn't have. EPS tracing, project deletes, these are big ones that they use it for on a regular basis. I'm talking every week they're using it. So there's a lot of value there. And if you're not able necessarily to rely on your IT to do the to reload the data. Another thing you can look at is using job services to run out an FCR of your projects, because that's something that job services will do. We'll do an export of your project. It may be XML, I'm not totally sure right at the moment. But the point really is that way you can get a backup, at least of your project. Very easily, you can control that yourself. And that gives you another stopgap measure that's available to you. If you've got the P6 loader, that's another thing that you can do with the P6 loader. You can run your global data out every single night. At the end of the day, just run it and push it out. And our newest version actually has a feature to save your definitions, sort of like what Sue was showing you there. So that's another way you can be proactive to take charge of administering and managing some of these data codes in P6. So those are some food for thought. If you've got a lot, especially if you've got a larger user group, these are things that would be easy to be proactive on and make sure that you're able to recover if somebody has an oops moment. Okay. Now, one of the most crazy oops moments that we've ever seen was when a fellow deleted the whole resource dictionary by mistake. Okay. And of course, that impacted every project that had those resources on it. And he didn't own up to it right away. So that is a big oops moment. And luckily, we were able to use Auditor to find out who did it, and also to figure out when and roll back. In this case, it was an Oracle database. We could do a rollback just on the resource parts of the tool. But this was only highlighted, I think it was at least 3 to 4 days after the delete had occurred. Okay, so that's not wonderful, but we were able to use Auditor to pinpoint the timing, take advantage of Oracle database features, and do rollbacks just on the pieces that we needed to. So in terms of recovery, it was a good recovery, but without Auditor, it would have been much harder for us. We would have had to take a guess at the rollback, and I don't know if we would have guessed 4 days back, because you would think that people would have noticed resource deletes a little sooner. Okay, that gives you some food for thought anyway on how Auditor could be a great addition to your toolkit on administering your P6. So if there's anything that you would like us to reach out after this webinar, please let us know. I'll just put this quick question up. If you have something specific you want to chat about, or how you would like us to follow up, please go ahead answer it. I won't share the results, but it will allow us to have a better idea of how you would like us to communicate after the webinar with you. Okay. Great. So we appreciate your time this morning. The tool is, I think, pretty great. Nice little addition. It's not too expensive and really can bring some peace of mind. And that's just one of our many, many toolkits for P6. We have quite a few toolkits for contract management or expedition still on the go, and we've got tools for Unifier as well. So keep that in mind if you're using any of those tools, and reach out if there's something you think could get some benefit from some of our add-ons. As I mentioned, we've got P6 Scrubber, which is fantastic for dealing with XCRs, and shortly we're going to have the XML components to that as well. And we've got a lot of depth of experience in integration, because from the very beginning we've had a programming team as part of Amwell's team. It's been part of our path from the very beginning, that automating, making data entry easier is hugely important, so that the project controls folks can really do what they're meant to do, which is help with the project management. Okay, well, we'll open it up to one more round of questions. If anything's jumping out, feel free to put it in the question area and we'll address it. If not, that's fine. We can always follow up. You can send an email to Sue and we reach out that way as well, and we can follow up afterwards. Okay, so we'll stay on for another minute or two, but otherwise we'll end the recording, and feel free to reach out to Sue directly through the email.